We're in conversation with Jeremy Waits, who's the General Secretary of European Environmental Bureau. Jeremy, there's so much talk about sustainable development goals, and I think there's a need for a much greener world for everyone. Can you tell us a little about what the Bureau has been doing in terms of achieving these sustainable development goals?
Yes, indeed. Well, first of all, the European Environmental Bureau, or the EEB, is the largest federation of environmental organizations in Europe. We bring together more than 145 environmental organizations from 30 countries with a combined individual membership of about 15 million citizens. And of course the SDGs are completely new. They've only just been adopted. But we've already been in the last months planning how to support the implementation process, in particular in Europe. But the really important thing about the SDGs is that they are directed and addressed to all UN member states, and not just like the MDGs, which were really aimed at the poorer countries, bring them out of poverty. The SDGs are addressed to all countries, and I think the big implication for the wealthier parts of the world is that the patterns of consumption and production that exist now are unsustainable, and we actually need to reduce the ecological, the environmental footprint of the wealthier countries, including Europe, in order that other countries can simply develop in a sustainable way and come out of poverty for those countries that are suffering from that.
What kind of role is geospatial playing in your area of work?
Well, I think that the development of technology in this area, geospatial technology, has been really crucial. More generally, one can say that there's been an information revolution over the last couple of decades, and this is part of it. But when it comes to environmental issues, I think that this technology can be extremely helpful. And already 10, 15, 20 years ago, we saw the use of this kind of technology being used, for example, to highlight sources of pollution. Under the in the United States they had the toxics release inventory. The more generic term for that is a pollutant release and transfer register. We've now had a whole number of countries who've introduced these pollutant release and transfer registers, or PRTRs, and these are really very, very powerful tools. They create an obligation on companies over a certain size and from certain sectors to report annually on their emissions, their releases and transfers of a set of some 80, 90 toxic substances. It can be more, it can be some hundreds, or it can be less, into the environment. And that information then goes in a publicly accessible database. In fact, it goes on a website, so any person from the public can simply go online and see the sources of pollution in their country, or they can look at sources of pollution from a particular type of industrial sector. And it's extremely powerful. I remember being shown maps back in the early days when you have a point and click, when you could point and click on a red dot in your town, and you'd suddenly open up information about a factory there, and you'd find out, well, these are the pollutants that it's putting into the river. You could then make comparisons with similar kinds of industrial processes in other parts of the country, or even in other countries. And this kind of technology has obviously moved further, but it's not enough just to say that the technological possibilities exist to do this kind of thing. You also need some kind of legal drivers, because you'll have resistance from polluting companies who don't feel very comfortable with the fact that maybe they are the biggest source of cyanide pollution in that country. They don't necessarily want everybody to know that, but actually the people do have a right to know that. And that's why you need legislation to drive these things forward.
What are your expectations from the upcoming COP21 summit that's going to happen in Paris?
I don't think it's going to solve all our problems in relation to climate change. I think there's, that would be too much to expect. However, I am hopeful that it won't be a repeat of the Copenhagen, the COP15 back in 2009. And I'm hopeful that it will see a step forward. And we've already seen some of the big the big CO2 polluters, the US and China, who were, I think, crucial in the fact that there wasn't much progress in 2009. Those countries have moved in their domestic positions. So I think there are some promising indications, but the challenge is huge, and the gap between where we are and where we're heading, as compared with where we need to be in terms of staying within the 2 degrees, is still substantial. And this 2-degree target is not something that you can negotiate with. I mean, this is science, and in fact, if anything, I would say the science is pointing more towards a 1.5 degree increase being the limit, what we can tolerate. And when you talk about these limits, you're not talking about something that is, a fixed and really well-known risk. You're talking about probabilities. You might be talking about a 2/3 probability that the conditions for civilization as we know it will continue. And I mean, I don't know if anyone would step into a car or an aeroplane if they were told you've got a 2/3 probability of arriving at the other end. And yet that is the kind of outcome we can expect when our global leaders meet together and make a decision about this. And to me, that's not acceptable. I mean, they need to do better, and we need to keep pushing them to do better. And if there are 5-year review periods where the targets and the ambitions can be strengthened, then I think Paris. If Paris can put in place that kind of process, then that can be very helpful.
The recent 5th session of UN GGIM said that geospatial information and GIS is going to be crucial for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Are you expecting a similar outcome to come out of COP21 in terms of climate change?
This kind of technology is going to play a key role in the future, and in actually just monitoring more or less in real time what is actually happening. So I do think it's going to be important. But in terms of what the political outcome will be of COP21 in relation to that issue, I'm not willing to kind of make a guess on that.
So, Jeremy, what are the kind of projects that the Bureau is working on, and what is your involvement with the different UN departments like UNDESA and UNEP?
We're collaborating closely with UNEP in particular. The director of our Global Policies and Sustainability Unit has just been elected as one of the NGO representatives on the Global Facilitating Committee under UNEP, and we're collaborating specifically around the implementation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals in Europe. We'll have an event coming up in November, not just with environmental organizations, but with different major groups and stakeholders. And that event, it's a UNEP regional consultation meeting which will provide input to UNEA 2. UNEA 2 is the UN Environment Assembly. The second gathering of the assembly will take place next summer, early summer in May, and we will be the main theme of that and the discussion is the implementation of the SDGs. So that's what we will be focusing on in that meeting, and seeing what Europe can do to play its part in ensuring an effective implementation of the SDGs, which means having proper monitoring in place, monitoring and review system. There are 17 SDGs, 14 of them have environmental content. And so they're hugely important to the environmental NGO community that we represent.
If you could just tell us a little about what is your takeaway from a platform like Ion Earth Summit?
I think the Ion Earth Summit is bringing together a lot of people working in this field of environmental information, and that's hugely important. And I feel that the discussions, especially on the more technical level of environmental information systems, are really excellent and high quality. I would like to see more emphasis in the future on the environmental rights aspect, the rights to information, the legal framework around access to information, because I think you can have any amount of very good high-tech presentation of environmental information, but it's not necessarily going to change the situation on the ground. If we've been hearing today of children suffering from arsenic poisoning, and sewage treatment plants breaking down. And actually, if you want to tackle those problems, you don't just need the information. You do need the information, and you need to have a right of access to the information, but you also need to have possibilities to engage, to do something about the problems. And I think that's another aspect that we think could and should be developed more strongly. But we think this has been a really interesting gathering, and hope it'll be continued in the future.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for talking with GeoBiz.